I welcome the first speaker of Proposition to open the case.
The rise of globalization looks like a few key things. Firstly, it looks like increased access and ability to influence and exert power through trade and foreign policy, where larger countries are able to have that sort of influence over smaller countries. Secondly, I also think this comes in the form of like exploiting resources, i.e. when the West try and come into places like Africa and exploit their mineral wealth, or like setting up sweatshop factories and exploiting workers in Indonesia. It looks like taking advantage of these developing countries and exploiting them for economic and political purposes. The alternative we support is more isolationism, where countries have the ability, and more importantly, they have the autonomy to be able to focus on their own interests and to be able to satisfy their own needs and preferences, instead of having to conform to a global order where you have to satisfy the needs of Western liberal democracies or larger institutions who have a very large say now in what you're able to do.
With globalization, it brings economic and educational opportunities worldwide that were heretofore unavailable. It also brings comparative advantage, cultural enrichment, increases individual choice, free flow of ideas and resources, and actually ends up ultimately helping developing countries. Globalization also actually increases individual choice, because freedom of movement, which is an important part of globalization, increases an individual's ability to move to the country where they want to move. You can, in fact, vote with your feet. It actually increases competition between countries, because individuals can select from the entire world, and if the country they're currently in is corrupt, economically disadvantageous, socially undesirable, or any other sort of factor.
We get this expensive brain drain. So we see that very privileged people who are able to move out of the country, who are able to afford universities abroad, who are able to afford to physically up and move to somewhere else in order to get a better job, people who perhaps don't have ties to family or perhaps have historically been more privileged and well off, are able to move to different countries and make a better life for themselves. Perhaps they're able to move to different countries and take part in Erasmus and other schemes. But we see that actually a lot of the people that get left behind are much poorer people who don't necessarily have this level of privilege and are necessarily worse off for the fact that they stay in this country that he talks about being perhaps not having the best social policies and politics. My second main point is on tensions. I think this is really important because previously, without globalization, we had smaller conflicts across borders and states, for example. But now we have huge superpowers who are vying for power over a more global sense, and we think we see more world wars as a result of globalization. For all of these reasons, I'm proud to propose. Thank you.
So economic opportunities, educational opportunities. It is understandable that in some of their countries, in most of their countries, if they flee them, one of the main push factors is that they cannot make progress because of totalitarian regimes, because of violent conflicts. Now, it can be understood that those violent conflicts might be artificially caused, although there is no way to prove this for economic interest. But that is beyond their reach. The reason why you would take people from abroad, why you would brain drain, is to foster innovation, to foster progress within your own country so as to reinvest. And falls in line, and this is quite a significant deviation, but to the motto of succeeding to serve. What is the purpose of achieving things in life if you are not going to give back to society?
I think we should do a kind of poll-based vote to decide who everyone involved thinks won, and I would ask you politely to take your university allegiances out of this question, however difficult it may be.
Oh no!
It is 6-5 to Proposition then, if I counted correctly.
No.
Wait, somebody hasn't voted.
Some people haven't
Oh,
voted.
me.
Though.
Leon didn't vote.
So doesn't
But
the
I'm
chair
gonna
get a vote?
Wait, Tom
People
has
have-
voted for. Tom has voted for Richard. Richard's side, sorry. So
Oh god, oh, don't take 6 all.
Leon, who are you voting for? Or are we just going to call it a diplomatic tie?
Like a proper debate competition. If I was judging this like you were in a Reading University debate competition, I would go for Proposition purely because they engage with the debate more in extracurricular things like points of information. I think Ara in particular even requested a point of information at one point and received none. So I think on that basis, but it was very close. That's how close I would call it.
Asking what are the strategic objectives of such intervention? Let's say in the context of World War II, let's say that there are concentration camps and you actually use military force to intervene in that context, I think that would be very coherent and also very morally correct.
The use of military forces doesn't necessarily commit to using violent actions. It's merely using a structured organization to provide aid. And in the face of humanitarian crises, such as severe poverty, droughts, natural disasters, they can provide a strategic advantage and strategic resource that could radically improve the efficiency of distribution of aid.
If we look at the atrocities that are taking place in these countries, as Thomas discussed, poverty, even extreme cases of poverty, drought, conflict has to be the most important case that we look at here. We need to intervene to help these people, whether those means are through military force. Maybe they will be, but I think we need to step aside from taking this in a political sense and realize the social consequence of not intervening. And I think this is all about intervention, but the word intervention has very strong connotations. And we need to realize that it's a moral duty that we have. It's a duty, it's an obligation as a world that we have to deliver aid in these crises. And I think everyone should agree with this motion.
If you're needing to use military force in order to give the humanitarian aid to those who need it, are you then going to have to deliver humanitarian aid to the people that you've just shot to give the humanitarian aid to the people who needed it? And then do you bring double the amount of humanitarian aid? And then do you have to fight your way through more people in order to give the people who you've just attacked to give out humanitarian aid? And then you end up a massive can of worms, and it's just like eventually you're just one side in the war rather than people trying to give aid.
Just a quick thank you to Richard mainly. He's been my point of contact, and also tell us your ideas. If anyone has any ideas for topics or sessions that we can all do as a collaborative, that'd be great. So yeah, thank you to everyone.
I also want to thank you, James, for being my point of contact, reliably responding to every single text mathematically. That's a good quality that we have lost in our world. And I do want to say a huge thank you to each and every one of you for attending and for having the stamina of staying until the very end. The ideas were wonderful. The atmosphere was quite congenial, and I really enjoyed myself. And I'm certain that my American comrades have also enjoyed themselves as well, just as much as all of you, our British counterparts, British friends.